As the year draws to a close, the crisis in Gaza continues, and we look back at some of the major developments in 2025. The Palestinian death toll now more than 70,000, about half of them women and children. And a humanitarian crisis that caused hunger and warnings of famine during the year took another deadly turn recently. Winter conditions and severe flooding have caused further suffering for the hundreds of thousands of Gazans forced to live in tents and temporary shelters. The year also saw the return of the remaining living Israeli hostages. And a ceasefire has been in place since October. Although Hamas accuses Israel of hundreds of violations, there are major questions now about what happens next. We will discuss all of that with our panel later in the show, but we begin with Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. He's the president of the Palestinian Medical Relief Society, and he's also founder and leader of the Palestinian National Initiative. He joins us now from Ramallah. As I pointed out in the intro, 70,000, more than 70,000 dead, and we're talking about hunger, famine, now winter conditions setting in, flooding. It's been a year of despair. How would you describe life for Gazans in this last year of 2025?
I think what we face in Gaza and to some extent in the West Bank is the biggest tragedy of the 21st century. The people are suffering tremendously. During this terrible genocidal war on the Palestinians in Gaza, Israel killed or injured 250,000 people, which is more than 12% of the population of Gaza. To understand what that means, apply that proportionally to the United States of America, and you would be talking about no less than 35 million people killed or injured. That's the scope of the damage that was caused by this Israeli genocidal war. But more than that, at this moment, 1.5 million people still live in tents because their homes were destroyed. 82% of all structures in Gaza vanished. And now they are attacked by these terrible weather conditions, which has already blown away 58,000 tents. People are simply cold, under rain, in very terrible conditions. They don't have the basic needs of survival. And at the same time, Israel did not stop bombarding Gaza. Since the ceasefire was declared more than 2 months ago, Israel has violated it hundreds of times, killing 400 more Palestinians and injuring more than 1,000. So the reality here is that up till now, Israel did not fulfill its obligations under the ceasefire agreement, including opening Rafah crossing for Palestinians in both directions, including allowing humanitarian aid. So far, what was allowed is much less than 35% of what was proposed or was agreed upon.
So what can be done about that? I mean, you mentioned, I imagine some would say this isn't really much of a ceasefire, and some of the other contours of the agreement also being violated. What can be done?
There is a ceasefire, but only unilaterally from the Palestinian side. From Israeli side, there is no ceasefire. They continue the attacks. What can be done is pressure. Pressure has to be exercised specifically on the United States of America, because it's the only country that can force Israel to respect the same American proposal, which was agreed upon, and the same agreement that President Trump announced. I think the United States has the obligation to stop what Israel is doing. And I think all countries of the world must raise their voices and demand stopping this terrible tragedy, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, where we are, as the Palestinians, subjected to constant attack by terrorist settlers groups that attack every day 8 to 10 communities. Every day they burn houses, they burn cars, they shoot people. Today, one Israeli settler shot and killed a Palestinian child in the village of Tqu', and they've killed more than 40 already, in addition to those killed by the Israeli army. So in the West Bank, Israel is building more and more and more illegal settlements and preventing any potential for a peaceful resolution.
Okay, you've given us a scene setter looking at the present, which does not look great, but there's still major issues moving forward, like Hamas disarmament, Israeli withdrawal to be addressed. Given what you're seeing right now, what's your belief about what we're going to see in the future?
We're standing at a cross point, and the issue here is two things. First, whether there will be international pressure on Israel to fulfill its obligation according to the first phase of the ceasefire, which means opening Rafah crossing in both directions, which means also allowing really sufficient humanitarian supplies, and third, stopping this firing on Palestinians and respecting the ceasefire. Then we have to enter into the second phase. And here you have three big challenges. The first one is what kind of stabilization force will be there? Up till now, it's clear who's going to participate in it. From Palestinian and Arab perspective, and the Arab mediators' perspective, this force should be a peacekeeping force and not an executive power. It should be a peacekeeping force that separates Palestinians from Israelis and enter the area that Israel is still occupying, which is 53% of Gaza Strip, to force the Israeli army out of the occupied territory in Gaza. And third, this force has to guarantee that ceasefire is respected. The other question that is big here is who's going to be ruling Gaza? We, the Palestinians, in agreement with the Egyptians, agreed that there should be a technocratic government in Gaza, which is a non-Hamas government, that would be ruling Gaza. We don't need a foreign body to come and rule Gaza. And as you know, there have been talks about bringing a foreign control of Gaza, and that's exactly what Palestinians don't need. We are quite capable of running our own affairs, and a technocratic independent commission could be doing that job till we reach the point of having our free democratic elections, hopefully in both West Bank and Gaza. And the last issue, which is still has to be guaranteed, is, as I said before, free movement through Rafah crossing.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. Let's say it all falls into place, which all of these have their own difficulties in place. But then comes the task of actually trying to rebuild, Gaza, the homes, schools, hospitals, critical infrastructure destroyed. What's the template for that moving forward?
The task is huge. I mean, what Gaza needs is at least $60 billion to be rebuilt, which is horrible, which is very big. But Gaza has also resources if we are allowed to use them. You have very important gas field in Gaza, which Israel has prevented Palestinians from activating. If we use it, this gas field alone is worth more than $50 billion. And in addition to that, many countries are ready to help and participate in reconstruction. But the question is, will Israel allow that or not? Up till now, Israel is not allowing any heavy machinery to come to Gaza. They're not allowing construction material to come to Gaza. And we hear very dangerous talk about reconstruction being done only in the area that Israel is occupying, which has been erased to the ground. I think that would be a huge mistake. What we need is reconstruction of Gaza everywhere. What we need is that Israeli army should leave Gaza and allow international, we don't mind having an international body, even if President Trump wants to head it, to be in charge of reconstruction, of guaranteeing supplies of necessary resources to rebuild Gaza, rather than a foreign body to rule Gaza. But that all requires a different American position and different international position, and to exercise pressure on Israel to start allowing at least us to rebuild our clinics that they destroyed, our schools that they have destroyed, our kindergartens, our basic infrastructure. You're talking here about lack of clean water, electricity, etc.
Right. Dr. Barghouti, thank you so much for your insights. Appreciate it. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
And for an Israeli perspective, joining me now is Dan Arbell. He's a veteran of the Israeli Foreign Service and currently scholar in residence at the Center for Israeli Studies at American University. Also with us is Khalil Jahshan. He is executive director of the Arab Center in Washington, D.C. I want to welcome both of you to the show. And Dan, let me ask you about this ceasefire. It's been in place since October, and yet hundreds of Palestinians have been killed. Hamas accusing Israel of violating it hundreds of times. It's a fragile ceasefire. Where do you see it, and is it going to hold moving forward into the new year?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that we're close to the end of implementation of the first phase of the Trump plan for Gaza. That does not mean that it has not hit rough patches and that there have not been violations on both sides. I think that let's be honest, without Trump jumping into this and shoving it down the throat of Mr. Netanyahu, we would not have a deal. And people will be still fighting in Gaza, and Israeli hostages would have died, and many more Gazans would have died. So a lot has to do with U.S. policy and U.S. keeping firm the fact that this deal needs to be continued implementation. That's critical, and without the U.S., it won't happen. As for Israel continuing with its fighting has subsided in a substantial way, yet in different points in time, Israel does hit targets inside Gaza, and there have been clashes with some armed terrorists, Hamas terrorists inside the Gaza Strip. And I think that's something that we'll continue to see more of, although again, U.S. is pressuring all sides to restrain and to calm things down. And I think that, as we enter the new year, I think U.S. pressure on both sides will be crucial.
Khalil, rough patches is how he describes it. How would you describe it?
I agree with that terminology. It is. We continue to face a stalemate with regards to the ceasefire itself. And to the accompanying, if you will, diplomatic efforts. The situation remains clearly unsettled and seems to be actually increasingly confusing to all parties concerned. And judging from developments today on the ground in Gaza and in the region, in an attempt to get basically beyond what Dan just referred to as phase one, because frankly, this is a plan of 20 phases, not just 2 phases, let's say, and we're about to kind of conclude. So there is plenty of issues. So if we couldn't even finish phase one, it's kind of very difficult, frankly, to be optimistic about the 19 remaining phases or steps in this plan. Israeli violations continue to increase. I agree with Dan that there might have been violations on the part of both, but considering the magnitude, if you will, and the fragility of the situation and the magnitude of the Israeli escalation, even the White House, as it's been reported today, has felt compelled to scold Netanyahu, and somehow seems to be accepting the Hamas version of things, that it is the Israeli violations, particularly the assassination of leaders, military or otherwise. And it's not just basically killing terrorists, quote unquote, it's killing a lot of civilians, and the numbers keep growing. I mean, we're way beyond 71,000 on the Palestinian side and way beyond 175 injured. The inability to move forward and today to, for example, reach an agreement at this meeting that was hosted today by the United States and Qatar with the Gaza Stabilization Force talks, that is not a cause for joy or for, let's say, optimism with regards to the future.
Dan, let me ask you kind of a follow-up on your perspective, which you pointed out that President Trump muscled Netanyahu to the agreement. But we also know that Trump has a kind of not a real focused attention span. He can get distracted, go in other directions. How difficult will it be to keep him focused and keep him moving forward? As Khalil points out, we're just on phase one. There's 20 points to this, and you've been in the Foreign Service. You know how difficult and complex these agreements can be.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that in this case, while he may be, his attention may be all over the globe, on this it seems that he's very determined to at least move to the second phase, and that his advisors, Witkoff and Kushner, are pressing ahead and are making all the necessary arrangements, including this, what Khalil referred to as this conference in Qatar today, to get ahead with the phase two, to establish the international stabilization force, to establish this so-called board of peace that will govern or will oversee day-to-day affairs in Gaza, to get international presence on the ground in Gaza, hopefully to set up a Palestinian governing body or entity that would kind of monitor things as well. There's a lot, it's a full plate, and it seems to me that the administration is focused on this right now, and as we enter the new year, I think that they'll continue. One more point important is that December 29th is a meeting between Trump and Netanyahu in Mar-a-Lago, and I think that that meeting would be, a lot of it would be devoted to, as you said, continuing to rein in Netanyahu and make sure that he follows suit. It won't be easy because Israel hasn't entered an election year in 2026, ahead, and so that will make things more prickly or difficult. But no doubt that the administration is determined to carry this forward.
And Khalil, you pointed out this is the first phase. So then people will say, well, if the ceasefire is, if there's problems with the ceasefire, what if Hamas decides they don't want to disarm? What if Israel decides they don't want to withdraw? There produces more questions. As you look into 2026, what are the biggest challenges ahead, do you think?
I think the biggest challenge is to adjust to these realities on the ground on the part of the United States and see how they can revamp this agreement in terms of what it lacks. This agreement from the very beginning was pregnant with problematic issues. First of all, it was not your typical diplomatically worked out agreement with details and where the input from both parties, both sides of the conflict were included. So this is the price we are paying for rushing into an agreement that was simply a PR agreement to kind of give the president the ability to get out there and say that he solves conflict number 8 worldwide. But frankly speaking, it will not produce the intended result in spite of the frustrations we've heard from the president personally and his key advisors, blaming Netanyahu personally, saying he has taken Israel in a way into a very difficult kind of dead-end situation. But expressing frustration doesn't solve diplomatic problems. These frustrations have to be translated in 2026 into practical steps that register on the radar screen of somebody who's thick-skinned like Netanyahu. So the meeting, I agree with Dan, the meeting on the 29th is very important, and it should focus on that point. And Trump needs to basically ask Netanyahu, are you with me or not? Because it takes two to tango. And if this tango is going to be just Trump on his own, it's not going to work.
So, Dan, you brought up this meeting. It's going to be critically important. What are going to be some of the signs you'll be looking for once it ends, whether it went well or bad? I mean, what are some of the things we should be looking for?
Yeah, it's a big question, as Khalil pointed out, whether this is going to be a come-to-Jesus meeting or it will be just another meeting in which both sides kind of come out of it and issue friendly statements, and will be much of the same. So what we need to look out for, first and foremost, is in declaration or an Israeli acquiescence agreement to move into phase 2. And phase 2 meaning, as you've mentioned, disarming Hamas, demilitarizing the Gaza Strip, and also establishing all these different bodies that would govern Gaza. If we see concrete steps toward in that direction, we'll probably think that it will be much of a successful meeting. There are other fronts that the two leaders will be discussing. That's Syria, where the U.S. is upset with Israeli behavior, the fact that the U.S. is getting closer with Qatar and Turkey, which is to the very dismay of Israel. I think that one issue that they are in agreement on is Lebanon, but again, that's a side issue right now. In terms of Gaza, a successful meeting would be concrete steps on the ground to implement phase 2.
And Khalil, you know, we've talked a little bit about the stabilization force and the technocratic government. What do we need to see there, do you think, where, again, we can look for some positive signs where perhaps this thing can come to an end?
Yeah. Well, judging from the failure of that meeting to produce any tangible results today, as we've heard from diplomats participating in that meeting, it seems to me that the agenda will remain the same. I think that they need to simply focus on the same agenda, which include shaping that force structure that they're talking about, the rules of engagement, arms policy, disarming or not disarming, deployment zones for the new force, training locations, the extent of the authority of this force, and so on, because you know you can't solicit support from these 45 invitees to this shindig, to this party, basically in absentia of details. So the next meeting, which will be in January, my understanding, they agreed today, for the chiefs of staff. They are kind of focusing on the military component of this. If that would produce results, maybe one could afford to be optimistic. But at this stage, it was essentially a meeting that produced nothing practical.
Dan, earlier in the year, I was in New York, tried to come out of my hotel, and it was flooded with protesters protesting against what was going on in Gaza. My daughter lives in Scotland. I was there, protests there as well. There's been international condemnation about how Israel's prosecuted this war. Can you talk to us about reputational damage for the country as a result of this? I mean, we saw Western countries, including France, the UK, and Canada, calling for recognition of a Palestinian state. I mean, how has the landscape changed, would you say, in the last year?
Absolutely. I think that Israel's isolation, international isolation, has grown and deepened over the last year. And this is not just governments. It's actually that are more critical, and it's civil society, it's non-governmental organizations, it's sports competitions, and it's cultural events like the Eurovision Song Contest. All those are kind of beginning to treat Israel as a pariah state, and that's very a great concern. You know, the other side of that coin is growing anti-Semitism and growing you know, more anti-Semitic actions and violence directed at Jews, as we've seen just on Sunday in Sydney, on that shooting, tragic shooting incident, killing 15 people, celebrating Hanukkah in Sydney, Australia. So again, definitely on one hand, you know, growing isolation of Israel in the international arena. On the other hand, growing anti-Semitism, which is another side of that coin.
Yeah, Israel obviously reputationally suffering, but Hamas also seeing some setbacks. Israel launching more attacks on Hezbollah in 2025, also hitting Iran. Khalil, how damaging has that been for Hamas?
I think that this war, the past 2 years, has been damaging to all concerned parties, frankly. I agree with the assessment with regards to what Netanyahu's policies have and decision-making has led to put Israel in a very, very difficult position as a result of its conduct of the war post-October 7th. But this little war that many of us at the beginning thought it was just one of those few days of warfare in Gaza, and then a ceasefire will be worked out, and then we'll, you know, back to the status quo ante. Really, I think it has grown into a kind of historic event. I think in terms of its impact presently and in the future on the region and on the parties, all of them, it exceeds the 67 war. It took us years, quote unquote, to clean up after the 67 war, but this one is even worse, and it's going to take much longer to do that. I think all parties, the Israelis, the Palestinians, Arab parties, the United States itself, I think the damage basically cuts across the board.
And Dan, I saw you nodding your head. Do you want to jump in?
I agree with Khalil. This is certainly, I believe that October 7th and the subsequent war launched by Israel would reverberate for generations in the region. It will impact Israelis, Palestinians, Arabs, the international community, and it will take years and years to put that behind, if at all. And the question will be whether, as we move into 2026, with continued implementation of the deal, maybe that'll impact other regional parties and to kind of move towards integration of Israel into the region, hopefully in the future. I don't believe it will happen as long as Netanyahu is prime minister, but perhaps after the Israeli elections, that could be an opportunity to start putting things back into place. But it will take a long time and it requires a lot of patience.
And Dan, you're here in Washington. One of the things that I've witnessed here in Washington is kind of a different kind of sentiment. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that because the administration is taking a lot of credit for what's happened in terms of a peace plan for Gaza, but we're hearing concerns now from conservative quarters that used to be very much pro-Israel. Washington perhaps serving Israel's interests ahead of its own. You've heard these comments, and they kind of seem to be getting a little bit of traction. I mean, your concerns about that, and what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. We've seen, different periods in history where there were discussions here in Washington, debates whether Israel is an asset or an ally. And I thought that, we're beyond that. But certainly the events of the last 2 years have brought this debate into focus. And we see, as you've mentioned, notable Republicans that are kind of distancing themselves from Israel, or at least being very critical of Israel. And of course, we see progressive Democrats that are certainly have moved away from Israel and have been very, very critical and beyond. If you look at the elected mayor of New York, Mamdani, and others. Yeah. So certainly Israel faces, it's a new landscape for Israel in America. Israel was spoiled over the years and used to enjoy widespread support from all quarters, was a bipartisan issue, and all of a sudden it's now a political hot potato. And so so it's a problem, it's a challenge, and I think that, again, this will require a lot of work on behalf of Israel as we move forward.
And Khalil, I want to give you a chance to talk about that as well. We've got about 20 seconds. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's dramatic change. And as Dan just said, Israel got used to a kind of being kind of the favorite party, if you will, to successive administrations in the United States. Now people are asking questions that they've never asked before, thanks to Mr. Netanyahu and the predicament that he dragged Israel into. But these questions go beyond Netanyahu. I mean, frankly, as I said earlier, the seriousness of this historic turning point is not going to be totally relieved or answers found once Netanyahu, let's say, is out of the political scene in Israel. These questions pertain to Israel's future and its relationship with the Palestinians, the future of peace in the region. And so it's a big challenge for all parties concerned.
And we are going to have to leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for watching another edition of The Heat.